It starts as a routine flight, but then radio silence. 5 minutes pass, then 10. Controllers grow anxious. At 20 minutes, fighter jets stand by. At 90 minutes, the truth is revealed, and no one can believe it. This is Northwest Airlines Flight 188. Let's understand the landscape of airlines in the United States. Airline mergers are never simple. When Delta and Northwest Airlines merged in 2008, it created the biggest airline in the world. But for pilots, it also created problems. Long-standing procedures changed. At Northwest, the captain handled pre-flight system setups. After the merger, the pilot flying took over that role. It might seem like a small change, but for pilots who had followed the same habits for years, it was a tough adjustment. The biggest frustration, though, was scheduling. Northwest pilots now had to bid for flights using a brand new system with 150 pages of rules. Many struggled to make sense of it, adding stress to an already demanding job. This frustration would soon play a critical role in a flight that made history for the passengers and crew of Northwest Airlines. Flight 188, October 21st, 2009, felt like just another ordinary night in the skies. The San Diego to Minneapolis route was nothing new, and neither were the men in the cockpit. The captain, 53, had been flying for decades, racking up over 18,000 hours in the air. Though he was based in Minneapolis, he lived with his wife near Seattle and planned his flight schedules carefully, choosing trips that allowed him to minimize hotel stays and get home as quickly as possible. The first officer, 54, had a similar setup. Living in Salem, Oregon, he also bid for flights that worked best for his schedule. But things were changing. The recent Delta-Northwest merger had introduced new rules, new procedures, and a complicated bidding system that many pilots found frustrating. Just hours before duty, the captain had been in the crew room, discussing how to navigate these changes. Meanwhile, in the cabin, 144 passengers settled in. Business travelers checked emails, families made themselves comfortable, and flight attendants ensured everything was in order. The Airbus A320 was ready for takeoff. No one on board had any reason to suspect that this flight, so routine, so familiar, was about to make history for all the wrong reasons. By noon on October 21st, the pilots arrived at the airport. The only concern was minor turbulence on the route. After a quick briefing and checks, they boarded 144 passengers and took off for Minneapolis, a flight that would soon take an unexpected turn. At 2:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Northwest Flight 188 took off from San Diego, heading to Minneapolis. Everything seemed normal as they climbed to 35,000 feet. But soon, they hit unexpected turbulence. To avoid it, they requested 37,000 feet, which air traffic control approved. About 1 hour and 23 minutes later, they settled at cruising altitude. With the aircraft steady, the pilots made a small but crucial decision. They took off their headsets. Instead, they relied on the overhead speakers to hear air traffic control, while the first officer could still respond with a hand mic, a minor choice. But soon, it would have major consequences. Pilots juggle multiple radios mid-flight. The captain's radio stays locked onto air traffic control, while the first officer's radio monitors 121.5 MHz, the emergency channel. If they ever lose ATC contact, this backup frequency lets someone else get through to them. This A320 also had ACARS, a system that delivers text messages from ATC or the airline. But there was a catch. The messages didn't pop up automatically. Pilots had to manually check them. Some A320s had a ding alert for new ACARS messages. This one didn't, a small detail, easily overlooked. But soon, it would matter more than anyone expected. For nearly 2 hours, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The first officer kept in touch with Denver Center ATC. Routine, smooth, no issues. Then, the cabin call came. Food? Of course! The captain stepped out for a quick break, then returned as their meals arrived. That's when the conversation took a turn. The new scheduling system was a mess, at least for the captain. He was frustrated with his upcoming flights. The first officer, confident. He knew how to use it, so the captain grabbed his laptop, opened his personal files. The first officer did the same. Both screens lit up. both pilots fully focused on their schedules, not the flight. Here's the problem. Personal devices are banned in the cockpit for a reason: distraction, fire risk. But at 37,000 feet, neither pilot was thinking about that. As the pilots stared at their screens, deep in conversation, a voice crackled over the radio. Denver Center was calling. It was time to switch frequencies. Silence. Another call. Still no response. This wasn't normal. A NORDO event had begun, an aircraft that had lost radio contact. In Europe, they call it a PLOC event, prolonged loss of communication. ATC followed procedure. If a plane stays silent for 10 minutes, alarms go off at the highest levels. The FAA, FBI, Pentagon, NORAD. Fighter jets are often sent to intercept, but strangely, on this flight, it took much longer for action. Meanwhile, Northwest Airlines dispatchers sent urgent ACARS messages to the cockpit. But here's the catch: no chime, no alert. The messages went unnoticed. The pilots, still lost in their own world, had no idea what was happening. The pilots were fully absorbed in their discussion about the preferential bidding system, unaware of the repeated radio calls directed at them. They later recalled hearing background chatter, but never realized they were being called. Minutes passed. The aircraft continued on its path. Soon, they approached the top of descent, the point where the flight management computer calculates when to begin descending toward Minneapolis. A decelerate message appeared on their primary flight displays, signaling the aircraft to slow down in preparation for descent, just in case air traffic control delayed their clearance. But no one noticed. The aircraft kept flying, following its pre-programmed route. Denver Center was worried, really worried. The aircraft was getting closer and closer to its destination, but still, no response from the pilots. Inside Northwest Airlines headquarters, dispatchers stared at their screens in disbelief. The aircraft was still at 37,000 feet. It should have started descending a long time ago. Had something gone horribly wrong? Had someone breached the cockpit? Was the plane still under the pilot's control? More than an hour into this terrifying NORDO event, the domestic event network was finally activated. Government agencies were alerted, but up in the sky, the aircraft kept going. Then, the flight management computer sent a chilling message: "I don't know where to go next." But no one saw it. As the plane flew past its final waypoint, its flight mode switched from navigation to heading mode, meaning it would just keep flying straight ahead, awaiting instructions that weren't coming. At 20:01 Central Standard Time, Flight 188 should have been landing. Instead, it flew right over Minneapolis Airport, still at 37,000 feet, heading east. 12 minutes later, a flight attendant called the cockpit. The crew in the cabin was getting nervous. There was no descent, no engine spool down, no usual chime at 10,000 feet. Only then did the pilots look up. They switched to a different mode and finally saw the problem. They had overshot Minneapolis by nearly 100 nautical miles. The first officer tried calling ATC, but their radio was still tuned to a frequency from over an hour ago. No response. Desperate, he switched to 121.5 megahertz, the emergency frequency. They relayed the correct Minneapolis Center frequency, and ATC was relieved to hear from them, but also suspicious. Was this really the flight crew? ATC tested them by issuing a series of left and right turns, confirming the aircraft was under their control. They also asked the pilots to verify that the cockpit was secure. Meanwhile, the first officer checked their ACARS messages, only to accidentally delete them all. At the same time, NORAD was preparing fighter jets to intercept the plane. But now that contact was restored, they stood down. The captain finally addressed the passengers, announcing their arrival in 23 to 25 minutes. At 21:07 Central Standard Time, over an hour late, Flight 188 landed safely in Minneapolis. Police officers, Northwest Airlines chief pilot representative. The pilots took breathalyzer tests. No alcohol detected. Their explanation? We got distracted. This incident made headlines everywhere, and for good reason. How does a plane miss its destination by over 100 nautical miles? Investigators had a tough time piecing everything together. The cockpit voice recorder should have provided key insights, but most of it was gone. The reason? The aircraft had been powered on and off multiple times before the recorder was removed. which erased all but 15 minutes of data. Luckily, there were other sources of information. The pilots, cabin crew, and air traffic controllers gave detailed statements, and the truth was clear. The pilots were so distracted by their personal electronic devices that they lost complete awareness of their flight. For 91 minutes, they had no idea where they were. The FAA acted fast. Within days, both pilots lost their licenses. The captain decided to retire early, while the first officer never flew for Northwest Airlines again. This case is a perfect example of why distractions in the cockpit are so dangerous. Pilots need to be aware of their surroundings at all times, who they're talking to, where they are, and what's happening around them. That's why they have procedures in place. For example, if they haven't heard their call sign in a while, they're supposed to do a radio check. They also monitor when they pass into new airspace, which is when controllers usually transfer them to a different frequency. If they don't hear anything, they're trained to investigate immediately. These pilots didn't. But here's the thing, by all accounts, they were good pilots. They weren't reckless or incompetent. They just got caught up in a distraction, something that can happen to anyone. That's why cockpit conversations avoid politics or other intense topics, because when you're deeply focused on something else, you forget everything around you. If NORAD had scrambled fighter jets in time, this incident might have ended with a stern talk and some retraining. Instead, it ended careers. Now, if you want to see another video that I think that you'll find really interesting, bye-bye!